Over the next few decades, the Indian economy is forecast to become one of the world's fastest growing economies, adding an estimated $400 billion a year to its GDP. Recently, the Indian economy became the fifth biggest economy in the world, symbolically overtaking the United Kingdom 75 years after India gained independence. If we measure GDP at local purchasing power parity, which takes into account the different costs of living, the Indian economy is already the third largest economy in the world. Recent economic growth has led to a sharp fall in poverty and improved opportunities. But this is still early stages for the possible Indian economic growth, which could occur over the next 50 years. During the 20th century, the Indian economy often struggled to increase living standards, but in the past decade has started to throw off the shackles of colonialism, limited investment, and inefficient state planning. India now has many favourable factors which will enable higher growth and continued progress in reducing poverty. Firstly, given that the world has an ageing population and falling birth rates, India has a unique advantage of a growing working age population. Very soon, India will pass China as the world's most popular country and the world's biggest labour force. And as multinationals seek to diversify investment away from relying on China, India will increasingly benefit as it seeks to attract investment in manufacturing and services. What is driving this Indian economic growth we are likely to see in the coming decades? Well, first of all, Indian GDP is now the same as Chinese GDP in 2007. So there's a great prospect for India to catch up with its Asian neighbours. Even small improvements in infrastructure, education, can give potentially very big benefits to the Indian economy. Secondly, India has a very high savings ratio, which will enable it to copy the successful Southeast Asian model of high investment and reinvestment in increasing growth. This high investment will be both through the private sector, through powerful multinationals like Tata, and also government public sector investment in improving infrastructure, and increasingly foreign direct investment from abroad. Historically, the Indian economy has often been held back by problems of corruption and bureaucracy. The World Bank rated India 130 out of 190 countries for the ease of doing business. However, despite all this bureaucracy, recent reforms go some way to creating a more unified domestic market, such as abolishing regional variations in tax, helping to create India to be more of a single market. There are now also more incentives for investment, both domestically and from abroad. Now, one limitation of the current Indian economy is its reliance on energy imports. It spends more than 4% of GDP on energy imports alone. And this reliance was highlighted in 2022 when the Ukraine war pushed oil and gas prices to record levels. This worsened inflation in India, undermining recent attempts to bring it down. It is also unwelcome given India's current account deficit on its balance of payments. However, by remaining neutral in the war, India has become a major buyer of Russian crude oil, benefiting from cut price deals. Also, the energy crisis has stimulated efforts and ambitions to develop new green technology. In particular, the hot, sunny climate of India makes it an ideal place to produce solar power technology. Now, given the prospect for economic growth in India, the government aimed to double the country's current electricity generation capacity from 400 gigawatts to 800 gigawatts in just a short space of time. And it wants to do this by using green-powered generation, something China did achieve, although with a strong manufacturing base that India doesn't yet have. and it is likely, despite its ambitions, it will rely heavily on coal, which worsens air pollution. Because it's not just about creating power for the Indian economy, but also dealing with air pollution, which is a major problem for the Indian people. A study published in 2019 by Lancet, a British medical journal, estimated more than 1 million Indians die each year from air pollution. Also, there is the issue of global warming, which is affecting India more than many other countries. Although India does make the point that its total CO2 emissions are relatively low compared to countries who industrialise first. Nevertheless, to meet its ambitious targets for green energy, India is encouraging large-scale investment from big multinationals and also developing new technology such as grid-scale energy storage, which is a bit like the principle of Amazon cloud storage. This uses solar power to pump water uphill during sunny periods, which can then be used to create power when it is needed. The aim is to create an energy storage cloud, which deals with the problems of intermittent wind and solar power generation. One strength of the Indian economy is in information technology, helped by a widespread knowledge of English, the global language. India has had striking success in delivering data to mobile phones at the lowest cost in the world. This strength in IT has also the capacity to help India become at the forefront of some highly technological green technologies, such as green hydrogen and green ammonia. And India has also made progress in developing electrolyzers. Now, all this points to a positive possible future for the Indian economy: higher investment, higher growth, falling poverty, and improved living standards. However, there are still reasons to be cautious. Firstly, India's debt is higher than many emerging economies, which will limit the government's ability to meet its lofty investment ambitions. And with global interest rates rising, there is a risk debt interest payments could increase to problematic levels. Also, India's tax revenue is just 12% of GDP, which is very low by international standards. This highlights the inadequacy of the government and its ability to invest in public services and education. Also, to meet its very ambitious goals, India will require substantial foreign direct investment to help fund the many projects it wants to do. Now, although multinational companies are looking to diversify away from China because of geopolitical issues, India is not without risk. Firstly, the rupee has depreciated more than 20% in the past 5 years, reducing the value of investments in India for foreigners. There is also the ongoing issue of bureaucracy and red tape, which can distort investment and make it difficult to do business, harming local enterprises. India still faces cultural and social barriers to integrating more women in the labour force with good education. India is also facing very real pressure from global warming. It has 17% of the world's population, but just 4% of the world's fresh water. Around half of rural households still lack a tap water connection. And for an economy that is still quite reliant on agriculture, around 74% of land under wheat cultivation and 63% under rice cultivation is at risk from water scarcity, and this is a problem that may get worse in the future. Also, despite high growth in recent years, unemployment in India has remained stubbornly high, exceeding that of many other emerging economies. Unemployment has been around 7% in 2020 and most of 2021. One issue is that India has gone quickly from being an agricultural economy to service sector, meaning there are very few unskilled jobs in manufacturing to absorb the surplus unskilled labour. And this means that economic growth has become increasingly unequal. Despite falls in absolute poverty levels, there's a lot of inequality, with people leaving agriculture struggling to get jobs, and very limited welfare payments to help those who don't have a job. Agriculture currently produces 17% of India's economic output, but nearly 50% of the workforce are employed in agriculture. So this problem is going to continue because higher productivity in agriculture will cause many people to have to leave rural areas and look for jobs in densely populated cities. There is also increased inequality from a geographical perspective, with much of the prosperity generated in the south and the more densely populated north getting left behind. Yet despite all these problems and challenges, the Indian economy has a huge potential, and in the coming decades there is the opportunity for the Indian economy to become one of the world's leading sized economies, getting close to Europe and China. Back in Vedic times, India was one of the world's global powers, and in the next century it's very likely that India will regain its former prominent position in the global economy. It won't be the economic superpower, but it will be one of Big Five: Europe, America, China and India. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Economics Help, and I'll see you soon with more great videos. Thank you. Bye.